Good morning and welcome to Rising. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is the final days of the Biden administration, and there are weighty world events taking place. Possible peace finally at last in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. We have a few guests today to discuss that, so that will be coming up in just a bit. I am joined, as usual, by Niall Stanage. Nice to see you, my friend.
Good to see you. How are you today, Robbie?
I am just fine. It's another frigid day in the nation's capital as we prepare for the disruptions to the streets and parking that will ensue on Monday for the inauguration. They've told us not to bother driving into this building. We are right by the Capitol.
Exactly. So a new president then, but a current president on his way out. And I believe that may be on your radar, Robbie.
Yes, indeed. Well, President Joe Biden did in fact deliver his final address as president last night. He emphasized what successes that he thinks he achieved as president, while excoriating various forces that he believes are having a pernicious effect on American politics, in particular, the so-called tech leaders. Biden warned that an oligarchy is taking shape in America. No doubt he was thinking of Elon Musk and perhaps Mark Zuckerberg, who have decisively abandoned the Democratic Party. One detects notes of bitterness. So long as tech leaders, innovators, and businessmen were willing to go along with the Democrats, they were viewed positively. But now that they're no longer going to do Biden's bidding and censor Republican speech, suddenly they're oligarchs. He also hit out at progressives' favorite boogeyman, mis- and disinformation, an avalanche of which he says is burying the truth.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
Now, here at Rising, we've litigated whether fact-checkers censoring speech on social media is a good idea or a bad idea a number of times. Hint, I think it's a bad idea, as most of you watching probably know. We've discussed that so many times on the show that I don't feel any need to do so right now. The reality is that the American people don't agree with Biden on any of this. The truth is no one is buying what he's selling. Biden's final days in office are an occasion to mark his legacy and his numerous failures. Look, that's not just my opinion. It's the opinion of, again, the voters. In a devastating final poll released by CNN, Biden's approval ratings are now as low as at any other point during his presidency. Just 36% of Americans approve of Biden's job performance. His favorability rating is 33%. Overall, 61% of Americans view the Biden presidency as a failure. Now, that reflects widespread disapproval of his administration among Republicans and independents. 71% of Democrats judge him a success, which is obviously a more appealing number, though it's still something of an indictment in these extremely partisan times to only get 70% of your own constituency. Despite what the mainstream media would have you believe about the obviousness of Donald Trump's unfitness for office, Republicans just don't see it that way. Trump is far, far more popular among the entirety of the Republican Party than Joe Biden is among Democrats. Now, that point was raised by CNN conservative commentator Scott Jennings, his own response to Biden's address. Let's watch that.
I think the way he's leaving office has been, frankly, pretty terrible. He's going to be remembered for a few things, but politically, it's mostly for when he was vice president, he and Obama sort of ushering in the Trump era initially, and then as he's leaving office as president, bringing back Trump and Trumpism stronger and more popular than ever. Today, Biden has like a 61% disapproval, and Trump is over a 50% approval and more popular, and his ideology is more popular than it's ever been. If everything you say is true, the Democrats should have had no trouble getting reelected in this election, yet they were.
It's an issue of a communications failure.
I know, and for Democrats, it's always been about communication and no introspection about the policies that led to him leaving office as one of the most unpopular presidents. When I watch this tonight, I remain astonished that he, his family, and other people around him thought he could ever run for another term. I mean, there's no way he could serve another 6 months, let alone another 4 years. The fact that they pursued that farce for as long as they did, to me, remains one of the most astonishing things about this term.
Now, even many progressives are recognizing the failures of the Biden administration. Yesterday, American foreign policy and indeed the cause of global peace achieved an important goal: a possible end to the catastrophic war in Gaza agreed to by Israel and Hamas. Now, it's unclear as to what will happen as Netanyahu is wobbling, but peace is closer than it's ever been. Credit for this fragile peace is being widely attributed to the actions not of Joe Biden, but of Donald Trump, who, according to reports, pushed the Israelis to accept a deal, something Joe Biden had failed to do throughout his presidency. As Washington Post columnist Shadi Hamid put it, Biden was completely unwilling to put any real pressure on Israel to accept a ceasefire. Trump doesn't care about any of the norms of treating Israel with kid gloves. He wanted a deal. Biden never wanted one enough. That's not some weird pro-Trump revisionist history. That's an opinion from the liberal, mainstream Washington Post. There's no way around it. Biden failed massively on numerous fronts, keeping prices down and creating an economy that works for all Americans, preparing the country to be a safe harbor for innovators and job creators, and leading on the global stage in a way that inspires our allies and defends American values abroad without absent-mindedly letting the world plunge into World War III. At the end of the day, it seems inevitable to conclude anything but this: Biden was just not respected by other world leaders, friends and adversaries included. What they say was what you saw, what we saw. This was a very, very old man, out of his depths and aged. At some point over the last 4 years, he ceased being physically and mentally capable of doing the job of president. Look, you might not love everything about Donald Trump. I certainly don't. When Trump does or says things I don't agree with, I will be the first one to call him out. You know, if you've been watching for a long time, I have no problem criticizing him. That's my promise to you as we enter a second Trump presidency. But look, we need a leader who can actually do the job. I hope, at long last, Joe Biden enjoys his retirement.
Well, Robbie, that was quite a, what would be the word?
Signing off.
Attack, a signing off. So I want to take issue with some things there. Firstly, I thought the most interesting part of Biden's farewell address was this idea of the tech industrial complex and the idea that there was an oligarchy forming in the United States. Whether one thinks it has recently formed or has been forming over quite a few decades, I do actually think the word oligarch is very appropriate for someone like Elon Musk, who spent roughly $250 million trying to get Donald Trump elected, who owns a major social media platform which at least we think is being algorithmically tweaked in some way to at least promote views in line with Musk's, but more to the point, who has billions and billions of dollars worth of federal contracts with the government. So the idea that, I mean, you know, what's an oligarch? It is someone who uses vast wealth to influence the political system in their own favor. I think that's an entirely fair characterization of Elon Musk, actually.
Well, he is using his wealth to influence the political system. It would be just crazy for me to pretend that's not what's happening. He exerts a massive influence over Donald Trump currently. Now, I mostly think that influence is for the good because I tend to agree with the policies of Elon Musk, and I think that his companies are good innovations for America. That includes Tesla and SpaceX, and I want these things to succeed.
That's a means versus the ends kind of argument, though. It's like it's okay for the world's richest man to spend $250 million electing someone because I agree with him.
Well, it's okay to do, like, it's okay on what level? It is permitted under our current right. No one is claiming that he's doing in the election sense. He's spending his money to get some kind of political end. Just like, I mean, Kamala has millionaire and billionaire supporters too. Now we might not like that level of moneyed influence on politics. I'm willing to concede that is not necessarily ideal in all cases. I think my only issue is that I think efforts to grapple with that are very prone to backfiring and are maybe just not permitted under our constitutional system because our Supreme Court has said money is closely related to speech, if not speech itself, and we can't regulate that. And also previous attempts to do campaign finance reform or whatever you want to call it, have, in my view, just created weird little additional loopholes for better connected people to jump through, like the whole PAC system. You're not giving directly to the candidate now, you're giving to a PAC and the PAC gives to the candidate. Well, who does this actually help?
Right.
It helps people who have political action committees and who can hire armies of lawyers to make sure it's all being done properly. This is getting a little specific, but look, I'm not rejecting your argument that this is something to be concerned about. I think the federal contracts in particular, certainly, if someone is serving as de facto leader of the country and then profits because their businesses rely on the federal contracts, yeah, I don't think that's ideal.
I mean, he's been put in a situation with this kind of quasi-department, DOGE, which is not not an official department, but it's nevertheless him and Vivek Ramaswamy primarily, who are being charged or given the responsibility by the incoming President of the United States to vastly cut and transform the federal government, in which they have a financial interest, particularly in Elon's case, in doing so.
Yes, but if they transform the federal government, look, I'm just looking at results. It sounds like they want to transform the federal government along the following ways. Eliminate certain agencies or departments or lower the federal workforce, including by looking at defense cuts, which is something you're interested in. And then Elon doesn't want to ban TikTok. Elon wants to keep the H-1B visas. These are policy fights in between the more populist NatCon side of Republican politics and the tech libertarian people. I'm, full disclosure, very clearly on this side.
Sure.
And so these are my people influencing the Republican Party in a direction that I want it to be influenced. So that's why I want them to call them oligarchs if you want, but I want them to keep that influence.
I will call them oligarchs, but let me get briefly to the Biden position. As you well know, and as our audience knows, I am not a big cheerleader for Joe Biden. I think the policy on Israel and Gaza has been disgraceful, honestly, and I think he has been ineffective in a number of ways. Let me just briefly make a couple of points in his defense. The COVID response in terms of actually getting vaccinations into people was quite effective. $1 trillion infrastructure bill, $370 billion to try to combat climate change, and other more concrete achievements that never got much attention, or at least didn't get Biden the credit he wanted, like, for example, the issue of capping the price of insulin for seniors at a monthly level. Those things, I think, did not form some sort of compelling narrative of his presidency. He was obviously going to lose if he'd gone forward for a second term. I think there were things in which he was ineffectual, but certainly a lot of people, even on the Liberal side, even who have criticisms of him, would argue, I think, that his failing was one of being often ineffectual, whereas the reason Liberals have such trepidation about the return of Trump is that they believe he's an active danger to American democracy.
Sure. The foreign policy failures, more than anything else, seem to me like they might be specifically related to Biden's cognitive, physical ability, age. The fact that it seems like Donald Trump and his people were able to say, hey, get this done, we are pushing for this, in a way that Biden didn't, says something. Now, we're going to discuss that, and it's not totally cleared yet. It seems like Netanyahu has perhaps some incentive personally to scuttle it because his political future might be in jeopardy if it goes forward. We're going to be talking about that today with Trita Parsi and Hen Mazig separately, a more very much pro-Israel guest and someone who has a more dissenting opinion on Israel's role in the Middle East. So we're going to be exploring that in much greater detail today on Rising. Stay tuned for more.